get started because the beginning really is just introducing us very quickly, so that'll take up that extra minute.
Sure.
Okay, creating a playground board, but a customized playground board. And if you want to go to us, Jen.
Sure.
Okay.
I'm Jennifer Dronchak-Cristiano. Here's my bio. We're just gonna roll through these, but they had them available.
Okay, Kathy Fredericks. I do work in the Wayne School District. And I'm also, I give a plug for njcart.net, which is a group of people all through New Jersey. And I know you've heard it in other presentations, so I'm just throwing that out there again. All right, next.
That's me, Barbara Seltzer, and I am a speech language pathologist, and I have a private practice in northern New Jersey. Do a lot of AAC evaluations and therapy.
Okay, and finally, there's Travis Tallman. She couldn't be with us today due to some family things going on, but she is also a very big part of this group that put this all together with lots and lots of AAC experience. Okay.
So we're going to get started, and many of the posts that we look at when people are asking about playground core boards is they're really looking for rationale. And we felt like some of the core rationale for why we're creating these playground core boards within our communities is that, number one, it increases community exposure to AAC, not just availability for AAC or complex communication need users, but actually the community as a whole. It also then does give opportunities for individuals with complex communication needs, the opportunity and the tools needed to be able to interact with peers. And then thirdly, it facilitates the inclusive opportunities for play for AAC users within a natural setting. So I think, again, all of those being some of the most important rationale as to why we really want to see the expansion of these core boards out in our playgrounds and in our communities. Oh, I'm on my double click. There we go. So we included this quote as part of this presentation, and primarily because it's play is the work of the child. And so often I think we're so focused in augmentative communication, especially when you are a practitioner within a school setting, is really thinking about, communication, and then sometimes is in relationship to academics and how they use their device in school. And I love this idea of having communication out in the community, and in opportunities where they really do have more language and more communication opportunities, more social communication opportunities, and within a play setting. And I think that's so important because there's such a high level of motivation for kids to be interacting and talking and asking and answering and commenting and really participating at a higher level. So play is, anywhere play is happening, I think is a good place for AAC to happen as well. It really does put that fun and functional for us. Barbara?
Okay, so now basically what we're doing here is we're going to be going through all the steps involved in creating a custom playground communication board. So the first thing you want to think about is the location. And when we're talking about location, we're talking about location within your community and then location within the location that you identify. So location within the community, you need to think about if you're going to be doing this in a school playground, if you're going to be doing this in a community playground, because that's going to affect the vocabulary that you're later going to decide on including, and we'll talk more about that later. Once you identify the location, then you need to decide on the location within the location. So I'm in the process right now of creating one of these in a local playground in my community. And I selected a particular playground because it's to start with. Hopefully we'll have them in all of the playgrounds. But this is a playground that was recently renovated to be accessible. So I chose that playground as a good place to start because a lot of people in the community are already aware of this as an accessible playground. Then within the playground, I needed to think about where to put the core board. So I went there, I walked around with other people on the committee that are going to be funding the communication board. And we looked for a location where all our needs can be met. So, or all our goals really. So in terms of creating this to educate the community, we definitely want it to be somewhere that's going to be visible to outside of the playground. But we don't want it to necessarily be on the outskirts because then it's not going to be used. So you want to find the best possible location. Within that, I wanted to consider where it would be so that kids could be using it throughout their play. So what I ended up coming up with was one large core board, which is towards the front, but angled so it's easily accessible by all the kids. It's also going to have vocabulary on both sides, the same vocabulary so that it can be viewed and accessed from either direction. I also ended up deciding to embed 2 smaller boards in specific play structures. So by doing that, if someone's in the middle of climbing on a slide, they could easily say more, stop, slide without having to go run to the front of the playground. The other issue that you need to consider is accessibility. So you want to make sure when you're creating the sign that it's at a height that can be accessed from a wheelchair. It's at a height that can be accessed by a small child, but it is also easily accessible for somebody who's older, depending on the population. And again, this is where you're thinking about your location. If you're creating this in a preschool playground, then you're going to have it much lower to the ground. And I think I went through everything on our slide here. So now we're going to move on to obtaining permission. The one other thing I want to mention about the other slide is just another thing that I added was a QR code so that a parent can scan it and then they can take the board with them on their phone. And we'll get to that a little more in resources. Obtaining permission. So once you decide you're going to do this in your community, you need to get support from the community. So you might want to start with your town council, may want to start with your mayor. You're going to have to contact the officials so that you can find out who you need permission from. Once you get your approvals and permission, then you can move on to thinking about, I believe it's funding is next.
And just if you go back just for a second, that picture was taken at the Wayne Handicapped Accessible Playground, and right smack in the middle is the mayor who funded it, believed in it. He was on board with it, and it made all the difference in the world. And that was our opening day when we unveiled that core playground board. And he invited the chief of police, everybody. It was amazing. So getting people on board really does help, because then we move on to funding and
absolutely getting people on board is huge, and a good way to do that is to share other successful projects. So for instance, Kathy had done hers in Wayne several months ago. So when I went to my council, my town council, which is where I started, I was able to refer back to Kathy's success, which was in the local newspapers. It was in the Bergen Record. And I'm sure that my council is very interested in helping children, and they're very good people, but it's also an election year. So sharing, and again, I've said this at other times, I don't care what the motivation is, as long as it gets the kids what they need. So definitely getting people on board by sharing other success stories is great. So funding, that's the practicality of it. We do need somebody to pay for it. So there are lots of different ways to fund it. For me, it ended up being quite easy. We have this committee on this accessibility committee in our town, and they're really excited about creating accessible opportunities for kids and adults who have special needs. So they're funding the project. But there are lots of different places you can go for funding. You can think about parent organizations. You can think about if you're working, again, your location is coming into play. If you're working on a school, within a school board, you might need to go to the school board. You can do fundraisers, local organizations, even community businesses, that it's great publicity for them. And we're going to have to credit on our sign, on our board, the people who fund. So it is very good PR for businesses as well as government, community government. Social media is a great way to go for fundraising now. And you really want to get some of the people who are going to benefit from this on board. Parents can be an excellent resource. Here we go again with, social media. Use Facebook, use Instagram, anything you can think of to just get people excited about it. And we can go to the next slide. So when you start thinking about these playground core boards, there are many pre-made ones that are available on the market from some vendors. And we're talking about giving you more information on custom playground boards, because there's just not as much, involved in getting a pre-made board, although there are some things you need to think about. So there are advantages and disadvantages to both. The advantage of a custom playground board is you can select and organize the vocabulary in the way that's going to be best for your users. So every playground doesn't have the same equipment. Every playground doesn't have the same age of people who visit it. When I did mine, I made sure that I included some vocabulary for some older users, like there's a basketball court. There's always an ice cream truck. So I tried to include some specific fringe vocabulary. And I was able to do that because it was customized. When you do decide, if you should decide to go for pre-made playground boards, the reason for that is that it's easier, I guess, so somebody might opt to do that because it's easier, might be a little less expensive. But if you do that, you want to at least consider some of the things that we're talking about for custom playground boards. So you can still, when you're choosing amongst pre-made playground boards, you could choose the vocabulary that you think would best meet your population's needs. Think about the symbol sets, and think about the size and all of the location things we discussed previously. But what we're hoping is that by giving you this clear blueprint, you will see that it's really not as complicated as you might think to design a custom playground board, and that you'll be able to wrap your head around creating one on your own. Yep, I'm ready. So you've decided you're going to create a custom playground board. These are the things that you need to think about. You need to think about the size of the actual sign. You need to think about the size of the icons and the number of icons that you're going to use. You need to think about the vocabulary. So again, there's core vocabulary that you would use for children who are playing in a playground. Words such as in and out and up and down and go and stop. Then you're going to think about the fringe vocabulary you might want to use. As I said before, ice cream truck, slide, swings. You want to think about the layout and the color coding, what symbol set you're going to use. You might want to include some photographs or if there's any idiosyncratic equipment that's unique to your playground. You want to think about if you want something like Braille, if you're in an area where there are a lot of users who might be blind and might be using Braille. You want to think about sign language. You also want to think about the nature, the demographic in your area. So is it going to be English? Is it going to be English and Spanish? You can do different languages, the text on different sides of the board. These are all the things you need to consider. Make sure when you do your board that you leave space for acknowledgements. So you're going to need to obtain copyright permission from the company that you use the symbol. So I used symbol sticks. I needed to get copyright permission. You can't make the mistake of thinking that you get copyright permission once and that's it. I needed copyright permission specifically for the large core board and the 3 embedded boards. And if I decide to do another board in another park in my community, then even if I use the exact same board, I need to get copyright permission again. And that needs to be printed on the sign. Something that Kathy had done in her first board in Wayne, which I thought was a great idea, and I've included, is to put directions for use on the top. We can't take for granted that everybody understands the best way to use these communication boards, and really what we need to do is model for our users. So it's very important to leave space on the sign for directions for use. When you create your size, you might be initially thinking that you want one size, but we're going to want to try to get a paper mock-up so that you can bring it to the park, bring somebody in a wheelchair, and actually the logistics you want to actually work your way through. Okay, next slide.
So when you're talking about directions for use, do we not have that slide, directions for use?
There isn't a sign. There it is.
Okay, so what I realized very quickly is, although we think everybody knows what to do with this, the reality is no matter how much experience they have, they don't know what to do with this. So there actually is a training process. And the directions are very simple. Point to the symbols when you talk, stick to the key words, just what we tell all communication partners. So if you say, do you want to go on the swing? You can maybe model the word want, or go, or swing, and basically have fun. But I have put directions for use on all the core boards. We now have 3 in Wayne, with more to go up. And there are other core boards that are being built in different places throughout New Jersey, because believe it or not, 8 seconds on Channel 12 News, people really saw it and then contacted me. And so we're working in other places to get these playground boards up. So the pictures that you see, this is a picture of, now if you look at the picture on your left, you're going to see how tall that board was going to be. So it's a good thing I was there, because that got miscommunicated. It needed to be closer to the ground. So since I was there, they were able to fix it and adjust it. They were very cooperative, but it is really important. You can't take things for granted. You really, truly cannot. And the next pictures are on the left. My daughter was the graphic designer. You're going to hear about how a graphic designer is the one who really puts it all together for you. And luckily, I have somebody in the family who does that. And on the right, the New Jersey Speech Language Hearing Association was there for the presentation of this first core board. To our knowledge, it's the first custom communication playground board in New Jersey at the time. Since then, we have more, but at the time. And they were so supportive, and that's why the blueprint is up on the Najisha website, and you'll get the links to that moving forward. So copyright and vector images, important stuff. Jen?
Unmute. Hi. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about when we were going through and creating this blueprint was specifically copyright and vector image information. And part of that is just because we as speech therapists, like, we're used to using board maker and symbol sticks and photographs, and we're kind of like a do-it-yourselfer community where we're often reinventing the wheel. And when you go and create a board like this, it becomes a different entity. We can't really just put it together, because if you've read feedback from people who've tried to create these boards and not gone through all of these vector image and copyright issues, they've ended up with issues with their boards. And the vector images, and again, not being, if you're not techie, the reason vector images are so important, and it's why we have to reach out to the companies and actually get the vector images directly from the companies, is that most of the images that you see, that you have access to, are actually pixelated images. And when you have a pixelated image, when you expand it, like all of us know, when you take an image that was small and then you expand it and you want to make it large enough to fit on a sign, it becomes pixelated. And so it really degrades the image itself. A vector image is actually a different form of that. So it's more of computer coding and programming and how that image is actually formulated. It's not a series of boxes like the pixels that go together to make this picture. It's actually different shapes and things. So when you expand a vector image, you don't get that pixelated quality in your images. So that's one of the things that we wanted to mention. So when you're reaching out to if you've selected a symbol set or an image system that you're going to be using, and reaching out to get those vector images is really going to be essential to your project so that the visibility and the clarity of your images is clear. The other thing is that when you reach out to get those vector images, you're going to be obtaining copyright privileges for these uses. And as Barbara had mentioned, copyright's really important because oftentimes when the company agrees to grant you a copyright permission, they agree to grant you the copyright permission in exactly the way in which you stated that you were going to be using this. So for example, when Kathy was doing her project, she got a copyright for the core board, playground board, the way that it was going to be set up and situated in the ground. When she decided that she was going to expand past just the board and have boards that kids could take with them throughout the playground, she needed a secondary set of permission for that. And at one point, we had been discussing the use of stickers, communication stickers that you could actually put throughout the playground for really important words like go or stop or help. Push, things that would be very specific to, say, you know, for some of the adapted swings, if on the tray in front of the swing it said go, stop, you know, all done, things that would allow them to kind of engage with their communication partner while they're in the swing. If you wanted to use that and use stickers, that would have been a separate copyright permission as well. So just think about how you're planning on using it. And if you use it in a different location, you need a secondary copyright for another location. So it is something that you have to be really cognizant of because they want to make sure that you have obtained all of those copyright permissions along the way.
Yeah, I honestly thought when I started that I could just take like Proloquo or Lampwords for Life and use any of those and then just blow it up into a poster and then I could, you know, no, it doesn't work that way. It gets very grainy, doesn't work. That's why you need the vector images. And the other piece with those boards that you carry, I went to Amazon, I got a brochure box. They attached it to the side of the playground board and we put laminated individual copies within and say for use on the playground, and people take them and use them around the playground when their kids are on the swing and don't want to get off and go all the way back to the playground board, say more, and then run back to, I mean, that's not practical, right? So it's the exact same thing.
And just as another note to what Kathy just added, and just the kind of person that Kathy is, when we were discussing this at one point, somebody had mentioned, well, what happens if somebody takes all of these portable boards that you have left out there? And Kathy was like, I'll be so happy. I'll be so happy and I'll just make more, because if they take these boards with them, it's somebody who found such value in that board that they wanted to make sure that they kept it and used it in maybe other locations for somebody who maybe didn't have access to an AAC system. And she was like, I'm happy if I spread communication around. So I think that's such a great philosophy, that when you're bringing something out into the community, you know, Kathy's like, I'll just make more. And then she was good
and
with
just
that.
so you know, that is happening and I keep making more. People
Good.
keep walking off with them and that's just fabulous.
So it's such a great attitude to have about that project, but also really telling that sometimes it's really, people don't have access to this. You know, they don't have access to communication boards like this. They've never seen something like this. They may have a younger child who's having some communication issues and not even really have, you know, identified what those issues are yet. And this can be a first step for them in seeing these things in place around their community and really normalizing that, I think, is so important. So part of the designing and creating of these boards. So first, Kathy had to go in and she had to identify a graphic designer. She knows a fabulous one, to be able to use those vector images to then create the board. So a lot of people who have kind of like DIY'd it themselves, when they went to go use their board and maybe they went to Vistaprint and they had their images and they went to go print it out, what they saw on their computer is not what was actually printed out in real life. The images were really degraded. That's why these vector images are important. And the use of a graphic designer is also very helpful because they can give you a lot of feedback in terms of where things should be placed and sizing and organization of your board itself. So that was really helpful. The next thing in part of that designing and creating process is selecting a sign company to create that AAC playground display. Now, Kathy had worked with an amazing sign company who actually had given her paper copies of the board so that she was able to make changes because she saw it in real life on this paper copy before they actually put it onto the board itself. And she was able to bring it out to the playground and kind of, have a better feel for it. Now, on the flip side of that, we mentioned here a sign company, but I know that Barbara had gone in a different direction and actually used a company that creates playground materials and playground equipment. And then they were using their playground equipment to be able to make this core playground board for her location. So there's lots of different options that you can go through. And I think that's really a nice feature of that is there's a lot of people who have become very interested in these projects. And so again, I had mentioned that the sign company provided that full-size paper mock-up, but it was very helpful. And Kathy said she made a lot of changes afterwards before it was permanent where you can't change it anymore. So that was something that was really helpful to her in that process.
It was huge because the first one, I had all these grand visions and it was very big. And I realized that that just wasn't practical. And we downsized it by 25%. And that's the core board. That's the playground board that you see in the pictures now, the downsized one. Had I not done that, had I not gotten a full-size model of what it really would be, I wouldn't have known. I wouldn't have known until it was too late. And that would have been a shame.
And now Kathy's going to take her previous mock-ups and wallpaper a room with them probably at some point. Be a great decorator.
I still do have them.
I'm sure.
I do.
And so as far as general information goes, we talk a little bit about the boards and the budget. And your budget is going to be dependent on who agrees to fund your project. I think this is such a great community tool that for as much as people fear the funding process, we've just received a lot of positive support, both in Kathy's experience and Barbara's experience, that people really want to jump on board and make this happen. So I definitely think that, budget is very important. And it's important to really know how much you're going to be asking for when you start this project, because that's what the first thing that people are going to want to know who might be paying for it. They're going to want that budget. But we gave a range because it really is such a general range, anywhere between $50 and $2,000. And that really might vary just on your the specifics of what you're looking for. You can still get vector images and get copyright permission, and maybe you have a fence in your playground that's right where you wanted this board to be, and maybe you decided just to get a vinyl of this printed through Vistaprint, and it was $50 for the vinyl that you were going to have because you want to be able to maybe take it in at the end of the day and bring it around, depending on what you were doing. So and if you're making a more permanent one that's maybe in the ground, then maybe it's going to cost a little bit more, depending on what you're doing. You're having one side of the board being utilized. It might be a certain price point. Barbara's using both sides of her board. So again, that might add to the cost, but definitely good kind of food for thought. Consider the various types. Yep.
Jen, we have about 3 minutes left. So maybe we can just scoot through.
Sure.
The rest are just pictures of different things from the
Kathy, weren't we 45 minutes? It's only 1:45.
Yeah, we have 45 minutes. It's a 45-minute.
Till 2 o'clock, Kathy.
Yeah, till 2.
Oh.
So we're good,
Okay.
right?
Ignore me.
Take a breath.
We're good.
We're good.
I'm known for talking too long, but I think we're still within
No,
time.
I didn't realize. I kept thinking it was 1:45. Sorry. Move on.
So anyway, so just consider your durability of your materials, what you're going to use. If it's going to be in a public playground, maybe even more so, considering that it might need to be graffiti proof, a graffiti proof surface, so that it can be cleaned and maintained. Kathy had already mentioned about the portable copies of that board to be able to take around within the community. We wanted to show a video of this, and I think this video really shows exactly what we're talking about and how important this can be to your local playground. Let me see if I
Wow. You like to play. Leo, what do you like to play? I like, show him. Slide. Show us the slide, Leo. Leo, do you want to swing more? Tell him yes or no. Yes, let's go do it. Yay! What? Oh. Your friends want to trip up.
And so one of the things that we noted in this video is being able to model, and not only you model, but having other peers model on the playground was so important. I loved how not only did he answer questions that were being asked to him, but he was asking questions. They were modeling how to ask questions of others. And I think it was just such a great, immediate reinforcement for the communication that was happening right there. So it really is a great example of ways that these core boards could be implemented directly in your community playground.
So we did a lot of publicity for the core playground, for the playground board in Wayne. So the first one was at the handicapped accessible playground. And through the mayor's office, we got all of the connections to all of the newspaper people in Channel 12 News. So they printed it in the newspaper. They also printed it in our local paper, the Wayne Today. That's the next one. This was the Record, this was the Wayne Today. And they had done a big write-up when the handicapped accessible playground was first opened. So this was like a follow-up with them. And then Channel 12 News actually came. They interviewed for about, I would say a good hour, and I think 8 seconds of it actually went on the TV. But it went on over and over. It did this loop on Channel 12 News. And I did get contacted by a number of people in New Jersey who are now working on creating playground boards, which was absolutely fantastic. The next picture is a picture of my grandchildren and me on the day. They're on the left. And on the right are some children, somebody sent me this, some children who were just gravitating toward it because there were things there that they recognized and they were happy to communicate. It's one other thing that I wanted to say. October is AAC Awareness Month. And as part of AAC Awareness Month at my school, I will be teaching or speaking to the 4th and the 5th graders regarding all aspects of AAC, the general education as well as the special education students. We will be having a contest on why AAC is important. There is making AAC mainstream is really important. My vision, my goal is that something like this, okay, it's going to start in a handicapped accessible playground, but it should be on every playground. It should be commonplace. It should be as commonplace as Alexa is, because Alexa is assistive technology, right? But everybody uses her. And I think the same thing needs to happen with playground boards. It needs to be on every playground. If you're going to make a swing, you're going to make a playground board with communication at the same time. This video was sent to me by a parent whose little boy that you're going to see does have communication issues. And he gravitated to this all by himself, and he's just adorable, so we included it. Hopefully it works. Uh-oh. Aw.
It says unable to play video, error 5.
Oh dear. Oh well. Basically, what it shows is this adorable 2.5-year-old little boy who is going to the playground board and pointing to the letters. And he was so proud, he was trying to say the letters. Give it one more shot.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see if there's a. Nope.
No go? All right. So basically, adorable little boy pointing to the letters and naming them, because the core vocabulary are also things like shapes and alphabet and numbers. Numbers are also on the ones that I designed, right? All core basic vocabulary. Also on the board that I designed, it includes a definition of what core vocabulary is. Words that you can use in a lot of different places at any age. All right, like go can be used by any age. We all use that word, from young children to adults. So that's also included. And I called it a core word communication station. You can call yours anything you want. You're welcome to use core word communication station. The idea is to make AAC mainstream, to raise awareness in the community. And if let's get rolling, maybe we just go over resources. Sorry about the video, guys. He was cute.
So let's get rolling is just, let's get rolling. Get it out there in your community. People will see it, and then they will want it in their communities. That's the goal. And this is the community education part. And this is what we want to do so that to get the AAC message out there. I just want to go over some of our resources with you. And let me start by saying this all came out of a project that we were working on for our NJSHA, New Jersey Speech and Hearing Association website. We created a blueprint, which a lot of times people will ask if the presentation is available, the slideshow. We did not make this slideshow available. However, the blueprint is available for non-members as well as members of NJSHA on the NJSHA website. If you go to njsha.org, and here's the link, you can get the playground blueprint. I believe it's under library. Donna can probably, point out exactly where it is on the website, but it is.
If you want. I can if you want.
Okay.
To www.njsha.org. That's an NJSHA website. You go to the For the Public tab, and then down to the library, and you will find some wonderful resources there. The AAC Core Board Blueprint is there. There's also a really awesome podcast there that was done by the committee. One of the committee members interviewed an AAC user. And I'm glad I get this opportunity to talk because these three ladies are incredibly innovative members of our committee. And anyone who wants to join and is an Nagisha member is really very welcome. We have tons of really awesome projects going, and I am such a proud member of this community.
So again, if you go there, thank you, Donna. There's step-by-step directions, everything we've discussed today. Briefly, I mentioned earlier the QR code. I think we all started learning about QR codes with restaurant menus during the pandemic. And a lot of times people were complaining, not complaining, had some concerns about these playground core boards. This is what I saw on some of the AAC SLP Facebook groups, because they're saying it's not natural. The kids can't stop what they're doing to run over to the front of the playground. And in trying to come up with ideas around that, there are several. Kathy's idea to take a paper copy of the board is one. Another one is to embed some of the boards is another. The QR code seems like a great possibility too, because then you can scan it on your iPad or phone, the parent, and then you can take that main board throughout the playground. So there are many QR code generators available. I had a little trouble at first finding one that would allow me to do this without a paid subscription, but I had success with flowcode.com. It allowed me to generate, I think you can generate 3 or 4 QR codes for free before you have to pay. And that will take you to the PDF of my board. The other resources we have on here are just some of the vendors where you can go to look for some pre-made boards. And here are some other web resources. These are now, again, there are many vendors. We are not trying to promote any of these. These are just some that are available that we wanted to share with you. Any questions? We have 4 minutes.
And just as a heads up too, if you go to the Nagisha site, we made the presentation a little bit friendlier with more pictures and videos that you would be able to get a more immersive look into what the playground boards are. But the blueprint itself is very detailed with a lot of step-by-step instructions with a lot of specific details on the vocabulary selection and some of the other things that we touched upon, but it's far more in-depth in the blueprint.
It's not as complicated as it might sound. It was complicated when I first did it, which is why we went to put together the blueprint. So everything that I went through is all done already. You don't have to figure it out. It's really very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Just one other thing I want to mention, if anybody has any questions, if you start working on this or interested in working on this, as Donna said, we're all members of the Nagisha AAC committee. And if you reach out with questions to info@nagisha.org, the email will get directed to us, and we'll be happy to, one of us will be happy to respond if you have run into any roadblocks along the way.
And really, feel free to contact us.
Mhm.
It's fine. Like I said, I'm already working with a number of people in New Jersey who are excited. And you don't have to be a speech and language specialist. I have somebody who's a paraprofessional who is getting something done in her school, and a teacher. Anybody who's interested in communication for children, those are the people that you want. They're the ones who are going to get it done. And families love this. Get families on board. They're awesome.
Thank you all for coming and listening to us.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Just as an FYI, Donna Spillman Kennedy is the president-elect of Nagisha. So it's really nice to have her, and a very big AAC advocate. So it's very nice to have her here rooting for us. Kind of cool. Thanks.
Thank you.
Right.
All right. Well, if there's no questions, Everybody's,
Enjoy the rest of the day.
yep. Next.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Okay.
Okay, thought it went well.